Honorable Gajendra Kumar Ponnambalam, you have 10 minutes.
I thank you, Honourable Presiding Member. Sir, we are discussing today the present crisis faced by the Sri Lankan state. It is not just the government, it is in fact the state that is in crisis. Because even if this government at some future date is forced to accept that it has to leave office and a new government is formed, that new government, whichever may be, will be forced to pick up the pieces. And that is what the state is in. It is in pieces. So the reaction that we have outside the parliament, on the streets, in ordinary villages, in big cities, primarily in the south but also certainly in the northeast, is that this situation has arisen because this government primarily has failed in its duty to govern. They have failed because of their incapacity to govern. When the government was making mistakes, when those mistakes were quite obvious, the opposition consistently pointed out alternate processes that could be taken. But the government chose to ignore them simply because they had a two-thirds majority in this house. And you had a president who won with a majority of 1.3 million. This government thought that they could do anything. They could get away with anything. And more than anything else, precisely because they had such a mandate, they thought that they are actually capable of dealing with a situation that the Sri Lankan state has probably, arguably, never faced in the past. Well, they have failed. And that failure has been understood by the general public. And that is why these very same people who gave this government a 1.3 million advantage when they voted for President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and these very same people who gave this government a two-thirds majority, today see no other way than to demonstrate to this government that they have withdrawn those mandates, that those mandates they wish to withdraw, and they want this government to understand that message. And the only way in a democratic system where you have elections every 5 years or 4 years, Sri Lanka 5 years, the only way in which in a democratic country, when a mandate has been given but the people decide that that mandate must be withdrawn, that they want to withdraw it, is to in fact get on the streets. And that is what they're doing. So if there is to be any form of accountability, the fact that the president must go, must resign forthwith, that this government must also resign forthwith, must be something that is above question. It is our reading, Honourable Presiding Member, that the only way in which the public's outcry can be contained, managed for the future, is if the government gets this message straight away. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa must resign and this government must leave. But there is a gap. Unfortunately, we are also constrained by what is known as a constitution. And this constitution does not provide for the crisis that is at hand. What we have within this house is not reflected outside this house. Or rather, what is reflected outside this house is not reflected in this house, because this house is 2 years old. This house is outdated, and the people outside that actually voted members into this house feel disenfranchised. So in that case, under the constitution, if the president has to go, he has to resign, means it is this house that has to appoint someone from within this house. But this house, as I said earlier, is redundant. Two-thirds majority, this government cannot even dream of if there is an election tomorrow, Honourable Presiding Member. And therefore, this house cannot be expected to appoint a president even if Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns. And it is for that reason that we say that there must be certain interim measures. Firstly, if the public outcry and if the crisis that is leading to a situation that could become ungovernable, completely ungovernable, is to be in some way contained, we need to have an assurance coming out of the president's own mouth that he will go immediately. Secondly, we need assurance that this government will also go. Thirdly, we need a date fixed, a date within the next 3 months to face a parliamentary election. Once these three assurances are given, then we can sit and see how we can go about this interim 3 months until which that election is to take place and until which a parliament and an executive that is representative of today's people's opinion can in fact govern. The fact, Honourable Presiding Member, is that the opposition also does not want to govern right now because they feel that they don't have the required numbers in Parliament. Just because you have some 40-odd members standing up yesterday and announcing that they are independent, I mean, they did support the President and this government on every issue, blindly. It is only today when the people are on the streets and are up in arms that they are trying to demonstrate their independence. So that independence can't be taken into account. And no reasonable thinking person in opposition will be confident enough to take on the mantles of government unless they are assured that their numbers and their interests in this House can be to some sense assured so that they can take the tough decisions that ought to be taken if this country is ever recovered. Finally, therefore, Honourable Presiding Member, I also wish to plead with the ordinary Sinhalese people who are today protesting. For the first time in the history of this country, they are protesting not only the economic crisis, but they are protesting the way in which government and state is acting. For the first time, you have the might of the military being unleashed against them, the might of the state being unleashed against them. And they are beginning to see how dangerous and how disenfranchised they are in a state where politicians only think of themselves, in a state where the politicians have lied to them for decades, not just over the last 2-3 years, but for decades. And where they realize that they have been robbed. They have been robbed. It is not the Northeast or the Tamil people who have been robbed. They have been robbed for 74 years. And we have been telling that through our mandates given in the Northeast that we have been robbed. But today, even the Sinhalese people themselves are being robbed. And that is why they are on the streets. This moment is a golden moment. This moment is a golden moment to make a change in this country that will result in a total new beginning, where Sri Lanka can actually represent all its peoples, where Sri Lanka can celebrate its multiple identities as Tamil-speaking nations and a Sinhalese-speaking nation. That reality must not be ignored. You have for the first time this opportunity where the Tamil people are willing to support you in that change. But you must support us. Not only will we agree to the abolition of the executive presidency,
Honourable Member, please
but
wind up.
you must agree to restructure Sri Lanka, recognizing the Tamil and Sinhala-speaking nations and on federal lines. Your unitary concept is outdated. You've had it for 74 years. You've had it for the last 12 years, even after the destruction of the LTT, but you have failed using that very same state structure. For God's sake, wake up. What these politicians have cheated you about, they are also cheating you when they say that federalism is for separation.
Honourable Member, please wind up.
It is not. I'm winding up. Just one simple point, Honourable Presiding Member. Hambantota district had to wait for a President Rajapaksa to develop. Probably the second most important family amongst the Sinhalese.
Honorable
today.
member,
But
everyone
it
is
had to
limited to 10
wait
minutes.
for a
Please
Mahinda
wind up.
Rajapaksa or a Gotabaya Rajapaksa to develop to what it is today. Shouldn't this development take place regardless? Shouldn't this development take place all over the
Honorable
island?
member, please wind up.
Should it only take place when a particular personality is in power? If it
Thank
is
you.
to take place equally all over,
Honorable member,
then
please
you have
wind
to
up.
get
Thank
rid
you.
of this notion of a unitary state. You have to take power to the grassroots. You have to.
Thank you, honourable member.
I'm winding up, sir. You have to gather the principle of subsidiarity, and the only concept, even for the question of development, the only concept that can make sense
Honourable member,
is
thank you
one
very
of
much.
federalism, and you must
Honourable Gamini
live up
Lokage, you
to
have
that
10
reality.
minutes.
Thank
ගරු සභාපතිතුමනි මේ වැදගත් අවස්ථාවේදී
If he comes,
වචන කීපයක් කතා කිරීම ලැබීම ගැන ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. අද ඊටාම වැදගත් කරුණු ගණනාවක් පක්ෂ විපක්ෂ අය කතා කරා. නමුත් අද මේ රටේ ඇති වෙලා තියෙන තත්ත්වය ගැන කල්පනා කරනකොට මට අද වගේ මතක් වෙනවා ඉන්දියානු පීස් ඇකෝඩ් එක අත්සන් කරපු දවස. එදා මේ වගේම කැරැල්ලක් මේ රටේ